I noticed it before she even stepped out of the car, the way she held her coffee, thumb drumming lightly on the lid, like she was trying not to spill a thought. I hadn't meant to stare. But the quiet rhythm of her fingers against plastic was something ordinary, really. Yet somehow it pulled my attention, the way sunlight made dust motes float above the dashboard. She parked in front of the little bookstore I went to every Saturday, the one with the chipped sign and a door that never fully closed. She didn't see me at first, crouched by the steering wheel, untangling earbuds, pretending I wasn't watching. And then she did, just for a second. Our eyes met in that soft, awkward way that leaves both people smiling, but neither knowing why. "Your usual?" she asked, nodding at the cup in my hand when I went inside. I blinked. Yeah. Thanks." There was something small in her smile, like she remembered, though I couldn't figure out why. I told myself it was nothing. Probably she remembered everyone's order. Still, I felt a flutter, an extra weight in my chest that wasn't there yesterday. The shop smelled like rain on paper and worn leather. I folded the napkin around my sandwich, not because I needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. She leaned against the counter, reading a book upside down, and I tried not to notice how her rings caught the light, or how she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with slow deliberation. She glanced at me again, just once, and I caught the faintest laugh that didn't reach her eyes. Not mocking, just private, like she was letting me in on a secret she hadn't shared yet. I cleared my throat, shifted on my feet, wishing I had a line that wasn't just empty. I texted someone halfway through my coffee, deleted it before sending, stared at the blinking cursor, and thought about how my evenings had become a series of paused thoughts and unsent messages. Nobody checked in on me, not really. But her presence, quiet as it was, filled something, like when a door you didn't know was open lets just enough light in to see the dust swirl. She said something about needing to run back to her car, then hesitated. I watched her walk out, long coat brushing against her knees. Then she left the door ajar. And that's when I saw it, black, sleek, lying sideways on the passenger seat. A second phone, just hers, left behind. I didn't touch it. Didn't move. Just watched her keys jingle as she approached, the evening light catching her hair, the half-smile that suggested she knew what she'd done. I wanted to call out, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, folding the napkin again, imagining what she might say if I did. When she finally looked back, she raised her eyebrows, a tiny question in her gaze. And then she vanished into the street, leaving the phone behind. I picked it up. And at that moment, just as the sun hit the windshield, the screen lit up with a notification I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure if I should have opened the phone. But curiosity, quiet, careful curiosity, won. The screen unlocked easily, a wallpaper of a dog, maybe hers, wagging its tail like it owned the world. A few missed notifications, nothing alarming, just ordinary life. And then a message draft, half-typed, "Don't forget the tickets tomorrow. I'm counting on you." She returned just as I was about to put it back. "Oh," her voice caught, soft, maybe a fraction too late to hide surprise. "I forgot that again, didn't I?" "Seems like it," I said, handing it over. My fingers brushed hers for a split second, enough to feel a current of warmth I wasn't supposed to. She didn't pull away. She laughed lightly, a sound that made the edges of everything else blur. "I'm terrible with these things. I should probably write myself notes. Or sticky notes everywhere." I smiled, unsure why I felt like her small confession mattered more than anything anyone had told me all week. "I'm bad at reminders too," I admitted. A pause. "Well, not always. Just, stuff I care about, I guess." There it was, hanging in the air, the hint of something fragile. She tilted her head, studying me as if she wanted to know whether I was serious, or joking. "Stuff you care about?" she asked softly. I shrugged. "Depends who notices." She smiled again, but this time it lingered, like she was weighing her own feelings, testing boundaries she'd drawn for herself. I noticed the subtle tension in her shoulders, the careful way she avoided leaning too close. Divorced, mid-40s, a life that wasn't mine to touch, but still, here we were, passing a shared cup of tea across a tiny table, quiet except for the faint clink of spoon against porcelain. I imagined endless scenarios, telling her a joke, seeing her laugh fully, helping her with something trivial and watching her eyes soften, or maybe nothing at all, just this small, suspended moment. Each possibility carried a thrill, and a warning. She looked down at her tea, stirring absent-mindedly. "You know," she said after a pause, "I used to work in a bookstore like this when I was younger. Not this one, but a similar one. Smelled the same." "Really?" I asked, leaning in slightly, drawn to the way her voice softened with memory. "What was it like?" She shrugged, lips twitching. "Lonely, mostly. People came in for books, but nobody stayed. Except once in a while, someone who mattered. Rare, but unforgettable." Her eyes flicked toward me, briefly, meaningfully, before she looked back at her tea. We sat like that for a while, silence wrapping us in a fragile kind of closeness. I noticed how her fingers traced the rim of her cup, how a strand of hair kept falling into her eyes, and how I wanted to brush it away without thinking. Then she laughed quietly at something she read on her phone, and I reached out, almost on impulse, resting a hand on hers. She didn't move it, and for a heartbeat, that single, careless gesture said more than any conversation could. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I didn't expect her to text me that evening. Just a small ping, the kind that usually meant nothing, except this time, it made my stomach twist. "Forgot your notebook." I found her at the bookstore again the next morning, crouched by a shelf, scanning titles with that faint frown she always wore when thinking about something else entirely. I wanted to say something casual, anything that didn't betray how much I'd replayed that message in my head. Hey," I said, voice cracking a little. She glanced up, startled, then smiled, quick, fleeting, like she hadn't meant to. "Morning. You came early." "Yeah, had a few things to think about," I muttered, hands stuffed in my jacket pockets. I noticed how she straightened a book, then lingered with her fingertips brushing the cover, careful not to show that she'd noticed me staring. There was a pause. And then I realized, maybe I was imagining it, but she wasn't smiling all the way anymore. Something had shifted. A caution. A distance I hadn't seen before. I tried to close it with a joke. "So, do you actually read these things, or just rearrange them?" She laughed, but there was a hint of strain. "Mostly rearranging. Keeps me busy." Her eyes flicked toward the door, maybe hoping someone would walk in, maybe wishing they would. I followed her gaze. Nobody. Just the faint hum of the heater, the rustle of paper. Silence stretched, thick. I wanted to reach for her hand again, but something inside me said no, not yet. She might pull back. She might leave. And then she did. Well, almost. She stepped closer, examining a book I could see she'd thumbed through before. I leaned in, maybe too close, and for a second, just a second, we were in that suspended space where things could go somewhere they weren't supposed to. Her eyes flicked to mine. Hesitated. Tilted her head slightly, almost like she was weighing whether I'd noticed the way she held herself, tense, careful. Her lips parted, just a fraction, and I froze. A friend from the shop walked in then, humming a tune. The spell broke. She stepped back, adjusted her jacket, smiled a little too brightly at the newcomer. "Oh, hey. Didn't see you there." I swallowed, feeling the gap widen instantly. Just air, paper, and our unsaid words. I picked up a book nearby, pretending to read, feeling the tension in my chest tighten with every second she wasn't looking at me. Her fingers brushed the cover, like an apology, or maybe a warning. She caught me glancing at her again. Her half-smile lingered. And then she looked away, almost shy, almost cautious. I imagined bending toward her, closing that final distance. Almost, but not. Not yet. I didn't know if I wanted to stop myself, or if I wanted her to. I walked behind her down the narrow path behind the bookstore, leaves crunching softly under our feet. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and old paper, like every morning I'd spent imagining this moment without ever expecting it to actually happen. She slowed near a bench tucked under a tree, stopped, and looked at me with that pause that always felt like she was weighing whether I mattered enough to notice. You stay late sometimes," I said, voice low. "Do people ever come by?" She shook her head, shrugging like it didn't matter, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but it's mostly quiet. I like quiet." I nodded, but I didn't move. I wanted her to say more, to fill the silence with something dangerous, something that didn't belong in a normal day. She fiddled with the zipper of her coat. Her fingers traced the fabric, hesitant. "You know, it's strange," she said, finally. "Talking to you feels easy. Too easy, maybe. I shouldn't. I mean, it's complicated." I kept my eyes on her hands, noticing the way they twisted the zipper, the careful avoidance of meeting my gaze fully. "Complicated how?" I asked softly, stepping a little closer, though not enough. Her laugh was small, almost bitter. "Age. Life. You're young. And her voice trailed off, swallowed by the wind rustling through the branches. I felt the weight of everything she didn't say. Divorce, loneliness, responsibilities. Me, wanting something I wasn't supposed to want. I wanted to say it all anyway. "I don't care," I murmured. "About any of that. I stopped. Couldn't finish. Didn't want to frighten her." She looked at me then, eyes soft but wary. "You're too honest." She shook her head quickly, as if to erase the thought before it could escape. We sat on the bench, side by side but not touching, and the quiet stretched long enough for me to feel my heart racing. I imagined leaning toward her, feeling the heat of her hand brush mine accidentally, imagining what she might say, what I might hear, and what I could never take back. She exhaled, a long, almost imperceptible sigh. "Do you ever think about what could happen?" Her voice was low, vulnerable, like she was asking the question to herself and hoping I wouldn't answer too quickly. I hesitated. I wanted to answer, to tell her everything that had been simmering since the first coffee, the first glance, the first touch of fingers on a phone. But I stayed quiet, letting the moment hold us, letting the leaves and distant city sounds fill the space between us. She looked at me, eyes searching. A hand moved toward her coat pocket, then paused. I didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, didn't blink. And in that pause, I realized she was asking something, without words, that I didn't know if I was ready to answer. The next morning, the bench was empty. Not just her side, both sides. I waited longer than I meant to, staring at the fallen leaves, imagining her steps crunching toward me. But she didn't come. I texted. Nothing. Tried again later. Read the messages I hadn't sent, the ones I'd drafted carefully, then deleted. Every time my thumb hovered over the send button, I imagined her reading them, judging them, recoiling. By mid-afternoon, she appeared at the bookstore, but different. A tight smile, eyes flicking past me instead of meeting mine. Her laughter was clipped, measured, like she was trying not to be recognized. My stomach twisted, noticing every nuance, the slight hesitation in her step, the way she rearranged books without looking, the casual distance she kept. "I have to go," she said abruptly, gathering her bag. I didn't move. Couldn't. The words I'd rehearsed vanished. "Everything okay?" I asked, voice low. She hesitated. "Should I press?" Step closer. But then she shook her head. I'm fine, she said, lighter than she felt, and left, leaving the door swinging gently behind her. I didn't follow. I couldn't. Something unspoken hung between us, something heavier than the air outside. Later, I found out why. Not from her. From someone else. A name dropped casually in conversation, a detail about her life I hadn't known, a son. Not old, not a stranger, but someone I'd never met, someone who mattered more than I had realized. I sat on the same bench we'd used yesterday, feeling the world shift slightly off kilter. Her son. Responsibilities. Walls I hadn't imagined. I ran scenarios in my head, her explaining it to me stepping back, me asking questions I wasn't ready for. All of them stopped at the same place, pause. I imagined calling her, texting her, showing up unannounced, but stopped. Because maybe she'd pull away again. Maybe this was her line, and I wasn't meant to cross it. Evenings became a series of small habits, reheating coffee, leaving books open to nothing, scrolling past photos I didn't take. And every time I thought I'd accept the distance, a notification would appear, a draft message, unsent, lingering in my phone like a ghost of what could have been. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next day, the bench was empty again. I left my notebook there, half filled with things I hadn't said, and walked away. No footsteps followed. No message arrived. Only the quiet, and the space she'd left behind. I found her in the kitchen of her apartment, the kettle whistling softly, steam curling around the dim light. I froze in the doorway, half afraid, half relieved. She hadn't seen me yet. Hey, I said, voice low. She turned slowly, hands on the counter, and gave me that look again, hesitant, searching, the one that always made me feel like she could see everything I hadn't said. Hi, she replied, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. The simple word carried the weight of all the mornings, the unsent messages, the unspoken thoughts. I stepped closer, careful, noticing how the warmth of the kitchen contrasted with the chill that had settled between us over the last week. I wasn't sure you wanted me to come, I admitted. My fingers itched to reach for hers, but I stayed just shy of the space she held sacred. I didn't know if you'd show, she said, almost whispering, almost laughing. There was a pause, a hesitation that said everything and nothing at once. The kettle clicked off. Steam rose, a quiet fog between us. I let my hand hover over the counter, close to hers but not touching, wanting to ask the question that had been lodged in my throat since that first coffee. You know. I didn't stop thinking about you, I said finally, voice breaking just enough to feel honest. Not even when I tried. Her eyes softened. A brief, careful exhale. I wondered if that was okay, she admitted. If it was, too much. We stood there, side by side, silence filling the spaces words couldn't reach. I imagined 100 ways I could bridge the gap, saying more, moving closer, but didn't. She wasn't ready, or maybe I wasn't. Instead, she picked up her cup, set it down, and brushed her fingers against mine ever so lightly. Not a gesture of certainty, but a gesture of presence. I felt it, a quiet acknowledgement, the connection we'd both been avoiding and craving at the same time. Okay, she said softly, just that word, and let the pause settle between us. I smiled, careful, small, letting it linger without pressure. Okay, I echoed. Nothing else needed to be said. Not yet. Not ever in a grand way. Just that touch, that shared space, that fragile acknowledgement of what had been brewing quietly for weeks. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like a start. Or maybe a pause that we were willing to share together, even if we didn't know what came next. And in that small, ordinary kitchen, among steam and the faint scent of tea, I realized something simple: sometimes the most powerful things are the ones you don't announce. We didn't speak for a while. We just existed in the quiet, and it was enough. Weeks passed. Not dramatic weeks, just ordinary ones, filled with quiet routines, small adjustments, tiny habits that felt heavier before but lighter now. I found myself back at the bench behind the bookstore on a Wednesday morning at 8:47 a.m., coffee in hand, waiting without expectation. And she arrived, slightly out of breath, hair tucked behind one ear, holding a black thermos this time. We didn't speak much. We never needed to. A nod, a half-smile, the subtle brush of fingers as we exchanged coffee, small gestures that carried more weight than any words ever could. The shop smelled of paper and rain, the same as it had months ago, and yet everything felt different. Softer. Slower. I remembered the first time she left her phone in my car, the awkward laughter over coffee, the bench, the near confession in the kitchen. None of it had been rushed. None of it had been forced. We'd grown into the spaces between words, into the pauses that once felt uncertain. Sometimes she teased me about my messy notes, sometimes I caught her humming softly while rearranging books. Life was not perfect, her son sometimes needed her attention unexpectedly, deadlines shifted, but we found each other in the quiet, in the ordinary, in the tiny threads that held us together. One evening, we sat side by side in her living room, tea cooling in the cups between us. I watched her hands wrap around the mug, noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as she laughed at something small, and I realized how much I'd come to notice every fragment of her presence. She looked at me, eyes catching the lamplight, and said nothing, and yet the silence said everything. We didn't need confessions. We didn't need grand gestures. What we had, the soft, careful existence of two people who had risked nothing and risked everything in small increments, was enough. As I left her apartment that night, I paused at the door, glancing back at her. She was folding a napkin, the same way she always did when lost in thought, and I smiled. She noticed it, and for a moment, her lips curved into a quiet, private acknowledgement. That smile said more than any words could, that we were here, together, in the ordinary, and that was enough. The bench behind the bookstore, the thermos, the black coffee, the 8:47 a.m. routines, all of it had become ours, little markers of a life slowly built with patience and presence. And as I walked away that night, the city soft around me, I realized something only we would ever understand: love doesn't always arrive in a rush. Sometimes it sneaks in through the small cracks of everyday life, settles quietly, and just stays. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?